There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Jim Huntsman, host of the Western Huntsman Podcast, coming at you from the Broken Time Studio in Hayden, Idaho. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Glad you are here. And I have a really fun episode today to get out there to the airwaves. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time in this intro talking about it because it is a super long discussion. But I do want to introduce the concept of the panel discussions that which this is the first episode of those. So throughout the winter, what I'm going to be doing is releasing one of these episodes per month, and it is called the Winter Series Panel Discussions. And this is where we're going to get, instead of just having one guest on, I'm going to get 2 or 3 guests on at one time and just generally, talk about things, talk about hunting, talk about, some of the problems that hunting has, conservation issues, anything along those lines. I've got some really good topics lined up. And so for today, what I have is I have Joe Giglia from Elk Bros and Blue Collar Elk Hunting Podcast and Academy, and I have Chris Rowe of Roe Hunting Resources, and I have Dirk Durham, the Bugler from the Elk Collective and Phelps Game Calls. I've got these guys are like some of the biggest names in elk hunting, some of the best minds in elk hunting. And I wanted to get them on to talk about elk hunting because we stopped doing school in September since, we're like over 2 months from September now. And I miss kind of really talking about elk. And it's always a good topic. It's always a good thing to get the kind of pick the brains of these guys that just get it done every year. And so I've got these guys on. This is going to be a great episode. Going forward, we're going to solve some problems with these panel discussions and get some conversations going. And I'm looking for people that maybe don't have big platforms. In fact, they don't have a platform at all. Maybe you're just a hunter and you have opinions about some of the way wildlife is managed or tag systems are allocated. And I don't care what state you live in. If you're interested in being on one of these elk panels, shoot me a message. And one of the discussion points is there's going to be a panel regarding adult onset hunters. So I want to talk to people that they're only up to no more than 3 years into hunting, and they've been out for at least one season, but no more than 3. If you're past 3, you're not a rookie anymore. You're getting salty. You're getting some salt coming out of that salt shaker, and I love it. So I want to hear from you. If you are and you'd be interested in being on one of these panel discussions, shoot me an email at jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. That is jim@thewesternhuntsman.com, and I will read through that. Some of the other topics are going to be conservation and public lands issues. I want to have a discussion with hunters from different states regarding tag draws and management things such as, season lengths, and that's all going to be kind of one discussion. And I don't care if you're in Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Idaho, Wyoming, or Montana, and I'll even throw South Dakota in there. Let's throw both the Dakotas in there. I know that's kind of right at the border of Midwest hunting versus Western hunting, but I do want to talk to you guys about those and on for like a topic like that. I don't care if you're a brand new hunter or you've been doing this for 40 years or better. I'd love to hear from you. So if you are interested in being on the show for those panel discussions, again, shoot me an email, jim@thewesternhuntsman.com, and tell me kind of what topic you'd be interested in talking about. So this one is the elk panel. We're going to have a deer panel, and we're going to have a bear panel. We're going to have a conservation public lands panel, and we're going to have a adult onset hunter panel. And I feel like I'm missing one, but I don't know. I don't have my notes in front of me because I'm unprepared, and that's the kind of student I always was, and it just continues on to today. So guys, this episode, I hope you enjoy it. It was actually a lot of fun getting these guys on the same episode together and ruffling each other's feathers and talking about elk and strategies and calling and behaviors and just generally things that we as elk hunters like to talk about and discuss. Let me know what you think of this episode, and let's get right into it with Dirk, Joe, and Chris. Brothers and sisters, full steam ahead.
The sad part now is Dirk can absolutely get naked.
I'm already there, bro.
Exactly. I heard the zipper zip.
He just needs that music in the background.
Dirk doesn't need any music. He makes his own music.
I make my own music.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, and I got something new and special for you coming at you this week. This is going to be called the Winter Panel Series, the Hunt Panel Discussions, and they're all going to have their own topic, and they're going to come out each month. And this month is going to be probably, well, let me rephrase that. This month, we're going to do the elk panel. And if you listen to the show, you know that I love elk hunting. I have a funny suspicion that the guys I have on this show also love elk hunting. And I am going to introduce them right now. So my first guest, in fact, let me use my announcer voice. My first guest puts the roe into the word robust. He doesn't wear skinny jeans. Skinny jeans wear him. His cold stare kills more elk than the hoochie mama could ever fathom. This guy doesn't call you on a cell phone. He calls you to his toes. Ladies and gentlemen, founder and owner of Roe Hunting Resources. He's no legend. He defines legend. Give it up for Chris Roe. How you doing, Chris?
Doing all right. Goodness gracious. I need to walk back in. I got to get serious. Apparently this is going to be a good podcast. I don't know.
I told you to have cold water ready, brother.
Oh,
all
man,
right. And for guest number 2, if he were a bowl of cereal, he would definitely be heart healthy. Dads all over the world warn their daughters about men like him. He doesn't own a stove or an oven because excellence is best served cold. Bull Elk pin posters of him on their walls to honor him in hopes of mercy. Ladies and gentlemen, the man that could bugle a Democrat out of a vegan food court, the legend of the Bugler. Give it up for Dirk Durham.
Oh, hey there. I should have been wearing boots.
And last but not least, when he sings the song of September, elk don't sing back. They butcher and package themselves out of fear of further consequences. Even God told me it's been hard to be humble after creating him. He's everyone's cool uncle. He doesn't ask you to pass the salt and pepper, folks. He is the salt and pepper. Ladies and gentlemen, founder of Elk Bros and Blue Collar Elk Hunting, make some noise for Joe Giglia.
Lord, it's hard to be humble.
I just want to know how many takes you did. I just want to know how long you worked on those introductions.
Dude, I am smoother than a baby's bottom. I came off all off the top of my head right now.
This has been a long COVID break for you, apparently.
I'm looking for Chris though. All I see is Fabio, man. I've been looking for Chris. And I just see Fabio.
Oh man, we had to turn the cameras off because Fabio's in a pair of undergarments that would be undesirable for the audience to see.
I don't know about that. You said you wanted ratings.
Guys, I appreciate you guys all being here. We're going to have a lot of fun in this episode. We're going to cover all things elk, and my hope is the audience gets a lot out of this conversation. And let's have a lot of fun. And let's kick it off I'll kind of go in this order because of the way you're showing up on my screen here. Let's kick it off by you guys kind of telling us a little bit about you. You've all been on the show before, so we don't need some long introduction. But tell us a little bit about you and your platform, and we'll just kind of go in a circle. Joe, let's start with you.
Oh, well, it's easy, man. I'll tell you what I'm not. So, Dirk is a world champion caller. I am not. Chris, the incredible behavioral wildlife biologist, not me. Dirk, he sits around in his underwear at home and okay, yeah, okay. So we have one thing in common. Oh, so like you said, we've mentioned it all before, and the founder, owner of Elk Bros, and a coach by trade, and still coaching. I've just gone from 15, 16, 17-year-old kids to 30, 40, 50-year-old kids and coaching them how to elk hunt, man. So it's a passion that I have. I get to do the two things that I know best in life, and that's coach and that's elk hunt, put them together. And you have the Blue Collar Elk Academy, and it's something that I'm real proud of. It's kind of a life project. So just a backwoods country boy that learned how to hunt at an early age and love to get out there with critters, find out how they work, and then use that to my advantage. So
Fantastic.
Elk is my thing, man.
Elk is your thing, Joe. I've seen some of those bulls you've been putting down. Dirk, let's go with you next, brother.
So I've been hunting elk since I was 15 years old, before I even have a driver's license. And it swept me away to this crazy addiction, passion, way of life ever since. So recently, this last year, did a collaboration with some good friends and guys in the elk hunting industry, Dan State and Jason Phelps and John Gabriel, and we started the Elk Collective. And what our biggest thing was, we didn't want this to be one man's opinion or two men's opinion. We wanted this to be a collective of ideas, because let's face it, there's more than one way to skin an elk, and I feel like in the hunting industry, in the hunting space, and well, in a lot of different spaces, people have all these different opinions, are pretty passionate about, and elk hunting is, that's one of them that, just because I do it different doesn't mean I'm wrong, and just because Chris does it a certain way doesn't mean he's wrong, and Joe does it a different way doesn't mean he's wrong. I think there's just, everyone's right, if they're putting down elk, and it shouldn't just be such a narrow-minded scope. I think everybody should come to the table and be able to teach new hunters and old alike different ways to hunt elk. And I think a lot of people will probably take a little bit from everybody and kind of formulate their own way of elk hunting. And I feel like it's a good way to bring everybody in the industry together, rather than sitting there and throwing rocks and saying, that guy, he says this or he thinks that. No, man, we're all in this together. And obviously, we all have a passion for it. And I've learned a lot from Chris, just listening to him talk in his seminars and stuff, and just kind of a different perspective and a different way of thinking. Sometimes I think we get kind of narrow-minded on the way we think elk behave, elk live, whatever. And you get a new perspective. It's like, I never thought of that. And then it opens up a whole new world of ideas and learning too. So,
Dirk,
it's all about.
You said something to me, and I don't know if it was on the show or just sometime we were talking or whatever, but we were having a discussion about, the Elk Collective and the other platforms that are out there. And you were talking about how some people see this as, potential competition or I was saying that, and your opinion of it was, you said something along the lines of rising tides raise all ships. And that actually, if I'm going to make a confession, that actually triggered my idea for doing these panel discussions like this, because you're absolutely right. You each have a different perspective in a different way of you pursue this thing we call elk hunting, and that's kind of what the concept of this show is in terms of these panel discussions. Is the rising tide it's going to lift all ships. You guys all have excellent platforms, and I'm really excited to dive into all this. So let's just keep rolling. I guess I'm kind of rambling here, which is what I normally do. So Chris, how about you, brother?
So I grew up hunting and fishing. Was just passionate about animal behavior, wildlife management. So decided to become a wildlife biologist. Again, was always passionate about behavior and why critters do what they do. And then as a hunter, always trying to see if I couldn't take that knowledge and make myself more efficient on the landscape and hunting. But it also translated into some of the stuff that I do from habitat management and critter management on the landscape as well. So over the years, decided to start sharing a bunch of that information to the hunting public in about 2010, back when internet finally started getting a little bit more user friendly for the average Joe. We started Roe Hunting Resources, where I just kind of took a lot of that information that I had and started putting it on the interwebs. And we started Roe Hunting Resources. It's a subscription-based model where you can come in. It's just, we've got elk, turkey, and whitetail, but elk is really the flagship one. That's where we've got over 50 hours of in-depth video-based education stuff. And a lot of it, the one thing that I wanted to always do is two things. One, the so what factor. Why am I flapping my gums at you? Am I giving you something of quality? And then the other thing is putting elk in front of you so you can watch elk do elky things, and then we can talk about it, and then you can kind of understand some of that behavior that I talk about and I focus on a little better. If you can watch the animal do what we're talking about and then be able to identify that on the landscape for yourself, I think it just helps with the education process to really solidify it. So that's really what I've been doing since about 2010. Every year, just dive in a little bit deeper, and just try to share that information with as many people as we can.
The cool.
Who's laughing?
I'm sorry.
I hear laughing.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I think the key word you're hearing from everybody here is it's about education. And I had somebody just the other day put something on how social media and Instagram, and kind of attacked a little bit that that we were cannibalizing elk hunting by putting all this information out, and convincing people to go out there that want to go elk hunting, and they don't know what they're doing. They go half mile from their vehicle. They take tags from everybody. It was just that kind of aspect that social media and what we do and how we educate, some of that was actually hurting. And I think the key thing that you hear here is about education. You hear it from Dirk, you hear it from Chris, you hear it from myself, and my answer to that is people got to understand that things like social media, things like those videos on YouTube, all that stuff isn't going away. So we can either have a bunch of people out there in the woods blowing it up for everybody because they don't have a clue, or we can do something on our part to help make them so they understand the nuances, so that they are responsible, so that they are ethical, so that they understand etiquette, and we actually make it a better situation for all of us. And when I look at what these gentlemen are doing, the expertise behind that, and the years behind that, and the passion behind that, I am not. Look, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And when you have people like Dirk, you have people like Chris, you have a platform like ours, the whole idea is to be part of that solution. So I just kind of wanted to, really put that out there, that I think it's real special what all these platforms are bringing.
I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree.
Can I expand on that a little bit?
Go for it, man. That's what we're here.
I'll agree with that, because I get the same criticism as well. Some people are deadly serious about just absolutely pissed off that some of the stuff that we share, and then there's other people who just tongue-in-cheek joke about it because they want to keep it as a secret for themselves because it helps them be successful. But the thing that really has resonated with me over these years, and now that I'm I'm out here in Northwest Kansas managing some whitetail and turkey properties, and I get to see. I used to be a public land hunter. Well, no, let me rephrase that. I am a public land hunter, but in Kansas, I used to only hunt public land, and then it changed into a mix of public and private land, and now I manage several thousand acres of private land for hunting. So I don't hunt public out here, but you sit there and you watch the change over the years on hunting pressure, hunting demand, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking Kansas, whether what I've seen in Colorado. Yes, what you said, John, is right. And you said part of the problem, part of the solution. The other thing too is you better learn to adapt. If you cannot adapt, you're just gonna fade away, if not just flat die, because this is a different world. Yes, are we losing hunter numbers, sheer numbers each year? Yes, we are. But I would argue that what we are getting in return is a more dedicated hunter and a more passionate hunter. And over these past several years, if not more than a decade, I can absolutely tell you the demand for high quality experiences on the landscape has gone through the roof. And so you have people that are just absolutely saying, okay, I can go wander around in the woods and hunt. Absolutely. Or I can take my time and my money, my efforts, and the free time I have in the off season, and I can try to make it so when I go out into the woods this fall, I can have a higher quality experience. And there are more and more people that are just absolutely hungry for a higher quality experience. And so not only do we have all the education stuff that's out there, but we also have new clothing lines and new textiles that make our clothing better for us to be able to stay out in places longer in a wider array of and variety of weather conditions. Our tents, our backpacks, our bows, all of the technology that we are taking to the field is way the hell different than what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So for the individual, and Joe, I hear you completely, because I get the same thing. For those people that are grumpy about the fact that we are helping people shorten their learning curve.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. If that's the case, then what I would say is, okay, think about where they start. And a lot of this ends up, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, a lot of this, in my opinion, stems from a core jealousy, because they had to go out there and struggle. It took them years to be successful, and maybe they only have one or two places that they hunt that they used to be successful, and now all of a sudden, that blankety blank evil YouTube had a video and some celebrity was nearby, and now I've got all these people hunting my state. I mean, Dirk, heck, you could talk about Idaho, what's going on there right now, but it's not the same world. It's not.
No, it's not. You make a really good point there, Chris, and the reason why I want to chime in right there is because you guys, all three of you have years of successful hunting under your belt, right? And I also have years of hunting, but you got to take the word successful out. So where this stuff is beneficial to me, so people that have a sour attitude about this kind of stuff need to understand one thing. The way I was raised, sorry, Dad, I was not taught how to hunt properly. My family did not know how to hunt. They would go out and that's totally fine for the people that just want to go out there and have a good time for the camp and the camaraderie and have the friends around the fire and drink beers. And I love all that. That I'm not discounting any of that, but they never truly learned how to be proficient and successful hunters. And they freaking taught me all the wrong things about elk. And I spent years struggling to get elk. And you know what changed for me is platforms like Roe Hunting Resources, the Elk Collective, YouTube, a Blue Collar Elk Academy, and podcasts and all this stuff. And all of a sudden I realized, oh man, that's why every time I make a bugle, I'm not getting a response. Oh, that's why I'm looking. I don't find any elk. I'm looking in the wrong kind of areas that elk live in. That's why every time I see a whitetail, he's going in the other direction. All these things that came together for me, and things turned. And this was like a year. It was like a 12-month thing for me. All of a sudden, I discovered all this information, and the next season, things started happening for me, and I started notching tags that I was never notching before. And that's why people maybe when they do get a little bit irritable about it, you have to understand we're all hunters. We're all in this together, and the better we all are as a whole, we're going to get along better. We're going to be more successful together, and things are going to go smoother in the future. And you got to think about the fact that we have challenges as hunters in terms of our future as hunters. And so we have to be together, united, and have this passion. Everybody has to be passionate. Like if I kept hunting the way I was raised to hunt, I would have lost my passion for it because I sucked. I mean, I was like the worst hunter. Joe Dirt could out hunt me. And that's how bad it was.
Y'all gotta quit throwing Joe out, man. Y'all.
I throw Joe Dirt under the bus all the time on my show, man. I even bought a Joe Dirt wig, and I make videos with my Joe Dirt wig on. I love it.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I got a question for Chris.
Oh no.
Real quick, because this has been nagging me. You sent me, and I know it's kind of off topic, but you sent me a picture of a rather desirable whitetail buck, and I want to know if either you or one of your clients got that thing.
Oh man, twist the knife, why don't you? No.
No. Okay, that answers my question.
No, he's at this moment, as far as I know, unless somebody poached him in the last couple of days. No, he's alive and well. He showed up 3 days ago. So not only, I mean, I could talk for a long time on this. He's a cool deer. So he occupies a home range that encompasses about 4 different landowners, me being one, our complex being one. 3 of those 4 landowners have quality habitat that can be hunted, and all 3 of us have different levels of hunting on our respective parcels. He vanished in the end of October, and no one that I know of saw him. Just flat vanished. Well, you know, all of us are sitting there going, well, who knows what happened? Maybe he got poached. Maybe he went somewhere else. Well, yeah, the other day here he shows back up on one of my key pieces, and that was right. And if you follow me on social media, you know what buck I harvested this year. It was literally, it was like the day or the day after.
That was classy, Chris. That was classy.
I know,
it was the day after that buck showed up.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I'm sitting there because I run a lot of cell cameras for security purposes. And literally, I mean, it was that buck's hanging in my garage the next night or the day after, or whatever. Blink, here he is, 20 yards in front of the double ladder stand. I'm like, oh. Yeah, he's a legit 170, 180 buck. Yeah.
I'm glad you told me that you run those cell cameras, man, because I was gonna dress like Dirk Durham and sneak onto that property at night, and I was gonna track that buck down. But apparently, that's not gonna happen if you got cell cameras.
Go, please do. I need to test it periodically, so go ahead and try. Besides, the game warden has been sitting here twiddling his thumbs. It's been COVID. It's been slow, so he needs work to do.
Yeah, but dress from the waist up, please, Dirk. Okay.
You never know. Some people might think it's Doug Flutie.
It might be Doug Flutie.
Look, I have a bone to pick about that whole Doug Flutie thing because I don't get why everybody thinks it's so funny, man. I mean, I got 12 cousins. I got 12 cousins and a neighbor that would be listening to Doug going, yep, that's right. You tell him, Doug. You know what I mean? It's like.
I had it. Oh, my God. Don't even get me started. I had a family member call me and be like, hey, I really like that Doug Flutie episode, man. I mean, that guy knows what he's talking about. Like, I'm not kidding you. This dude is a hillbilly that lives out in the sticks, and he's a cousin. I'm surprised he even has a cell phone. Calls me up and was all excited about Doug Flutie's episode as if it wasn't satire. It was pretty funny.
The only thing was, I mean, it was 2 point on for it's. There was a lot of experience factor in that. So,
we all get to be just no comment. Flutie.
So I want to take you to that experience factor thing that I just talked about there, and bring you back around a little bit to what we were talking about, because there's a point I want to make when you were talking about flattening that learning curve earlier, Jim, is that I want you to think about something that, most guys, they go out for a 5 or 7 day season a year. That's it, right? And
Yep.
some guys, if they can get out there every year, I mean, these guys coming from back east. So you think about it, if they're out there for 7 days a year, that means in 5 years, they've gotten just about a month's worth of experience, if you think about that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why, the type of things that we're talking about for those experience factors. I just wanted to throw that in there, from what we were talking about before. I didn't mean to dump off of Doug there, because I love Doug, man. Because I actually have a couple of bones to pick with Dirk, man. Because
Dirk,
Dirk.
popcorn. Let's just fire away. I can get some popcorn over there.
Hey, man, the whole Maverick thing. Your car don't start, get a Maverick. Can't find your dog, get a Maverick. Your wife wants to leave, get a Maverick. Look.
Yeah, where was that? Where was that? I remember that.
Your wife wants to leave. It's because of Maverick.
It's like when you get a Britney Spears song stuck in your head and it won't go away. That damn Maverick ad would not get out of my head. Where was that? Was that on a podcast?
Hold on a minute.
But
Hold on. Wait.
No, I don't really get Britney Spears songs stuck in my head.
You let that one out too quick. That one came out just subconscious. I want to know more about this Britney Spears. How many albums do you own?
A few. Oops, I did it again.
All I know, man, is I'm on my 256 Maverick, and I still have a dead vehicle, no dog, and Mavericks felt like tears when my wife left me, man. So
you should have stuck with a pink
country
one,
song.
It does sound like a country song.
Garth Brooks. Dirk, I want to start with you with this question, man. What do you think has changed the most since like the days you started elk hunting? And think of something that is applicable as to like, why would that be important today to know? What has changed the most in the world of elk hunting, in the I don't want to call it a lifestyle. It sounds so cliche-ish and lame.
Passion.
Yeah. Passion's a great way to put it. What's changed?
Man, I'd say the whole face of elk hunting's changed a lot since I started hunting. I mean, back when I was a kid, if somebody said going elk hunting, immediately a picture would be painted in my mind's eye of wall tents and horses and setting up a camp and hunting right out of camp for 10 days or 5 days or however long you got. To where nowadays, I picture Jim Zumbo and that beautiful mustache he had and that big cowboy hat and his Levi jeans, button fly.
Love it.
501s. Those are the kind of the pictures in my head that I remember from back in those days. Fast forward to today, elk hunting now is all about technical gear, gadgets, technology as far as handheld device, just technology. I feel like that we are almost living in the good old days of elk hunting as far as like the equipment we have and the resources at our fingertips. It's not as difficult, I think, to hunt these days or go elk hunting these days as it was back then, especially for guys who coming from the east side of the nation coming to the west. There's so much more information and good gear available. Back in them old days, I mean, shoot, you had to have big wall tents and bedrolls, and it was a huge camp compared to like all the lightweight stuff now. And some guys still hunt that way, which is awesome and very romantic. But I feel like more and more today, everyone's gravitating towards high-tech technical clothing, lightweight gear, and gadgetry, which it's not a bad thing, but the interesting thing is, if you look at, and I hear this all the time with these naysayers, especially people who don't want to embrace, it's a never-ending battle of argument in Idaho here about lighted lighted arrow nocks, right?
Yeah, lighted nocks. Yep.
By God, if you let Idaho have lighted nocks, you might as well throw the whole damn state away, because all of a sudden overnight we're going to have 80% success rates. But if you look at success rates in 1989 versus 2020 in the archery world, especially, it hasn't really increased that much. Even with all this awesome high-tech gear and all this information at our fingertips, it still hasn't increased dramatically to where people, fish and game agencies aren't saying, "Oh, hold on, man, we got to make some changes because people are just knocking the crap out of the elk and the deer with their bow and arrows." So
yeah, I know.
I think there's been a huge facelift or a big change, but in the end, there hasn't been a lot change.
So, I mean, yeah, that lighted nocks thing, and I've gone back and forth on that issue a million times. I've never used one. I've literally never used one. And I've hunted elk in Utah, Idaho, and Washington. And so I haven't hunted all over the West, but I've hunted elk in enough places that I know. I'll leave you guys if I think I've basically talked to you, all three of you, about this last September situation I had where I hit that bull. It was a complete pass through, and I never found him. And I lost several nights of sleep over this. And it's what's been bothering me about that situation for me. And I kind of want to get your guys' take on this, is when I think back to the moment that I released the arrow and I hit that bull and he flopped around like a fish on the bank, and then he got up and ran off. I never found him. When I think back to the moment I released the arrow, I can't think of anything that I would change about my shot, my placement, my setup, and that bothers me. Like that's something that bothers a lot of bow hunters, when that does happen, because inevitably it happens to everybody. But it usually I can say, oh man, I know what I did. I deflected off that twig. I was holding a little high, or I didn't range it, or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. I don't have an answer this time. And I feel like if I had that lighted nock, it would have, because it was getting dark. It was starting to, the sun was starting to fade. And I feel like I would have seen where that arrow went through. Let's talk about that situation. Has that happened to you guys? And what do you say about that when you do hit an elk somewhere and you never find him? Like, comfort me a little bit. Or don't, or rip me apart.
I think, I personally, I'm all for allowing lighted nocks here in Idaho or in any other state. I mean, Pope and Young has said they're fair chase. There's no reason why you shouldn't have them. Personally, I may or may not want to use them. No particular reason. I mean, I could take them or leave them. But I'm with you though, not Chris. I'm with you, Jim.
I love you too, man.
It would have been awesome for you to be able to know exactly what happened to your arrow once you released it. Even in really good lighting, I've lost sight of my arrow many times, and to where, like, man, God, I think that was good, but I'm not sure. I lost sight of the arrow in good light in a close shot, and then only to have the elk run just a short distance and die. Or let's face it, we've probably all lost an elk or so, and that would. Maybe you would have did everything a little different in your track job, maybe not, of knowing and say, oh shoot, my arrow went X, went wherever. You might say, oh, it didn't even hit a vital spot, and I'm good. And then you wouldn't have all this heartbreak and sick to your stomach. You'd still have some heartbreak because you still didn't make a perfect shot.
It would
have closure to it.
That closure is I feel like what I needed on that one, because it like, I'll tell you, you guys all have these elk hunting platforms. Let me put it to you this way. Had I had a video camera, somebody filming that entire encounter with that elk, it was a textbook call in. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I am trying to highlight the fact that I warmed that elk up. And then I pissed him off. I closed the distance, and I got that sucker to come in so spitfire mad he couldn't even see straight to 23 yards. And I loved my arrow or my shot placement and where I thought that arrow was going. But that's the mystery. Bam. That's where the whole what I thought was just this glorious call-in session with this pissed off bull elk. And he was a mature bull. He was a good bull. He wasn't, some record breaker or anything by any means, but I would have been so happy with him and thankful for him that I can't even begin to describe it. And I never found him. And so that is, go ahead,
I
Joe.
want to tell you, Jim, though, look, when it comes to these critters, they are so big, they are so strong, and you can do everything right and crap can happen, man. Things can go south. I mean, everything right. I get to see so many shots and so many hits. Being a guide, beyond what I do myself, I get to do so much of that throughout the season, both rifle and bow. And I had a client this year that punched perfect, man. I mean, right in the pocket. Everything was there. And 3 days later, I find this bull. 3 days later, and I've got a photograph of where the hit goes in. Anybody would look at that and go, dead bull. I mean, that's it. It's down, and going to be down at least in 400 yards. And that bull ended up living for over 36 hours. Walked off, and I found him a little over 3/4 of a mile after putting on 20 miles of search and trying to find it. And the greatest thing about finding that animal, it was bittersweet because we found the animal. We could no longer harvest the meat, but what it did do was, my hunter was so, just like you, beating himself up to the point where he was talking about giving up archery, man, because he was like, I shouldn't be out here if I'm going to do this to an animal. And when we found that animal, what it did was it validated. Did you really?
I did. I had that thought. I'm like, man, maybe I should, whenever I use a rifle, the animal goes down. And I've taken animals with my bow, and I'm good with my bow. But when that happened, I thought maybe I am not good enough to do this. And so I don't mean to turn this into that whole. I could do a whole podcast about how much I can cry in my beer over that 29th day of September 2020. But that thought does go through, and I'm glad you guys found it because like one of you guys said, that closure I think is super important.
Well, yeah, my point is that you're not always going to get the answer, man. Sometimes crap just happens. And I mean, I looked at this hole, and then when we looked at the opposite side, how it happened, because the bull was quartering away slightly, the arrow goes in behind the shoulder and somehow gets turned and comes out, only gets one lung and comes out about 4 inches past the other lung, which let that critter go for a while. But by all science and by all looks and everything that I've ever seen, there's no way that should have happened, but it did. So, I mean, stuff happens sometimes. Man.
Yeah, no, I'll add to Joe. I mean, that is the one thing that I will say. For me, guiding has taken away a lot of my personal opportunity to hunt, but it puts me in the back pocket of way more experience and more people actually shooting and killing animals. And I mean, so Dirk, to your point, I was heavily involved with sportsman politics in Colorado before I moved out here. And I was on the board of directors for Colorado Bow Hunters Association back when the last iteration that Colorado sportsmen were wrestling over lighted nocks. And I'll tell you, it saddens me to hear some of the same tired old arguments that we argued 10 years ago being used in Idaho right now. It's like, okay, guys, seriously, this is, and this is not meant as any disrespect. It's not I'm not saying this in a pejorative. I'm not trying to cut someone down, but the vast majority of people that were still opposed to lighted nocks are people that had limited to zero experience with lighted nocks and lots of different people shooting arrows, hitting lots of different animals. Because, I've got that one YouTube video of my client in Arizona. He was using a crossbow at the time, and on video, the shot looks like he just 12-ringed that thing. The hunter thought he 12-ringed that thing. The bull takes off, and goes off running. I catch up. I get up there. We look at the bolt. and there's stomach material on the bolt.
Oh, wow.
So you sit there and you're like, what the? Now, I had to, anybody who's watched that video knows I left the camera rolling, let my hunter stay there, and I just left. I dropped back. I did the classic fadeaway calling, and I was able to get the bull to come in. But I did not see anything unfold. I was almost 100 yards away by that time. So when I get up there, he's excited. He thinks he 12-ringed it. He knows the direction that the animal took off running. We go up there. I see the tracks. We find the bolt. And the first thing I look at is I'm looking at stomach material on the bolt. Well, what the frickin' hell? What in my mind, I'm like, oh, hell no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, meanwhile, his head's going, what the, no, I know where I hit him. And I'm like, the bolt, the stuff that's on the bolt don't lie.
Yeah.
Sure enough, we followed that bull. I don't know. We went 60, 80 yards and boom, these piled up. We're like, what the? Sure enough, I mean, arrows and bolts are going to do some crazy things inside critters. And that arrow went in, 12-ringed him. And for some reason, whether it glanced off a bone, I don't know I don't know. It took a hard left and exited out the guts. Now, it was enough to cause all that hemorrhage and all that damage. And I mean, the bull died. Like I said, the bull took off in a dead run and died like 80 yards away. So, I mean, he was dead in seconds. But being able to have the video camera there, we were able to go back and say, okay, obviously we found the animal pretty quickly. But the issue with the lighted knock is it does not, in my opinion, it does not help you. It does not put an animal in front of you. It does not assist you in making the shot. It does not do anything to kill the animal.
It doesn't fly further.
It helps you.
It doesn't fly straight.
It helps you recover that animal. And for those people that will argue that, well, it's going to increase harvest success and harvest rates, I would argue, say, well, hold on a minute. Dirk, I think you said it. Someone goes and makes a shot and then loses that or doesn't know where that arrow went and doesn't know how the arrow went through the animal, where he hit it. She hit it. They go to follow up, and then they're like, oh, well, I must have missed, or it must be not to be a lethal shot or whatever, and they don't find the animal. There are a lot of people that will go back out and continue to hunt. And if they go out and they harvest another animal, well, they just killed two animals. They legally harvested one animal and tagged it. And they could have looked and they did due diligence on their first one, but the animal still died. However, if you put an arrow that has a lighted knock on it through them, you might darn well know that, oh, crap, I did hit him a little far back and it was a liver shot. I can't go after him in 30 minutes or an hour.
Absolutely.
I need to wait for 6 hours so I don't jump him and push him into the next county, unbeknownst to me. I can look on my wall right now at one of my best whitetails. I shot this thing from a tree stand, 20 yards. I was above him. It went basically high in the rib cage along his spine and angled forward in his body. Arrow did not come out. It was just late evening, and he took off and he ran out. It was 20-mile-an-hour winds, really windy that night. It was really warm. He came into the decoys. He just destroyed the decoy. I smoked him. He takes off running. He goes out into the CR, this tall, 4-foot tall grass of CRP. The arrow never came out. The entrance hole is next to his spine coming in from the top.
What is CRP?
Not a drop of blood. Conservation Reserve Program. It's basically native grasses, warm season grasses. So imagine grasses that are 3 to 4 foot tall, thick. I mean, they're just massive, thick, tall grasses.
Okay. So it's like a habitat management type kind of area.
Yeah, you see people pheasant hunt it and all that type of stuff all the time. It's great bedding cover. It's just absolute nasty, thick stuff that's great for pheasants and quail and deer bedding and all that stuff. But when you have no blood trail, it's impossible to track through.
Becomes a nightmare.
So I spent that night trying to find this deer. Can't find him. I said, I've got to wait until morning and I'm going to have to come back and crisscross. The next morning, now all night long, it's like 70 degrees out.
Right.
So I come back the next day. I start at the tree stand. I start grid searching this thing. I eventually find my deer. The meat is completely spoiled. Mm-hmm. At the kill site, I'm sitting there with my deer. I turn around and I look, and I can physically see my tree stand platform. And the arrow is sticking straight up in the air. If I'd had a lighted knock, I would have watched that deer run across that CRP and just fall over dead. I 12 ringed him. There just was no blood. If I had had the lighted knock, I would have recovered that animal within 30 minutes, and I would have saved every ounce of that meat. But because I didn't have that, I lost an entire, I mean, he's a mature 6-year-old deer, 200 plus pounds. I lost every ounce of meat just because there was no physical way to track that deer. I just happened to catch the offside knuckle of his shoulder. It stopped my arrow and it didn't go through. So I had no blood trail.
Man.
Chris, you totally validate their argument, Chris, in all the ways that they are not even thinking about. And that's that by having something like that, it is going to increase harvest because it's going to turn W's into notched tags. And what I mean is turn wounded animals into notched tags. So it absolutely is going to increase the harvest in that way.
And we're talking statistics. And we're talking like this is just an archery hunter's problem. This shit happens with rifle hunters all the time.
Good man.
Like
absolutely.
I've shot. I remember the moment like it was yesterday. I shot a monster mule deer one year, and that by all means that should have been a dead buck. The way I saw where it hit it, they do that little hop. And the way you could see that fur move through the scope, all of it. That should have been a dead buck. Never found him. I even went back like a week later looking for crows, looking around. Never found him. I don't know what happened. He should have been a dead buck. So this isn't just an archery problem. Is a point I'm trying to make. But when it comes to archery, I think that the lighted nocks are nothing but beneficial to both the hunter and the elk. And when I say the elk, when somebody wounds an elk, it could take 3 weeks for that thing to die. And that hunter has moved on. He's determined he hasn't killed that bull, and he's going to go maybe shoot another bull. So everybody's suffering when that happens. So anyway, not to stay on the lighted knock topic all night, but actually, Joe, you brought up a point that I want to talk about when you were talking there. I want to ask, and I kind of want everybody's opinion on this. Like, and I'm starting with you, Joe, strictly because I just read your blog post about that guided hunt you went on with that cow elk.
Right.
What in your mind, what is it that elk hunters do that messes up their hunt more than anything else?
What is it that they do that messes up their hunt more than anything else?
What would you say is like the biggest mistake they make consistently across the board?
For me, the biggest mistake they make is not really knowing their animal, not knowing how to finish and close a deal, not understanding the anatomy, not understanding what to do when they get to that point. And I think a lot of elk hunters, especially because they see so much of this stuff, all of this YouTube video and everything like that, and everything, they see all these highlight reels basically, that they get out there and they think, okay, I'm going to do some screaming, I'm going to do this, and animal's going to come in, I'm going to shoot it, we're done, boom, I'm happy. And it doesn't happen like that, man. It's work and it's a grind. And I think probably if I, now that I'm kind of putting this in my head, I think their expectations are probably, or the level of expectation is probably their biggest mistake, and that they don't have a correct reality on what it's going to take, and so they're not able to match up what all it takes out there, how tough the grind is.
That's a great point. Just to hold that thought, because to shift over to Dirk for a minute. Dirk, you are the dude that does a lot, and I mean a lot of YouTube content. And what the question I have for you is, how many hours of film? Maybe I'm aging myself. That sounds, what do you call it now that it's digital? Like
it's called video.
It's not even video now.
Okay,
it's all
video. Video.
It's called data now.
just be platform neutral. Just say how much content.
How much content do you video to make one of those? Like, I think your videos are usually like 40, 45 minutes, somewhere around there, to make one video.
Oh man. It's hard to say. It's day to day. I mean, you start rolling tape.
Yeah. You got your reel. You got your black and white reel. How many of those reels do you carry in your pack, old timer?
The old 8 millimeters. Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There you go.
But you start filming at daylight every morning, and then you're done at like after dark. And in between there, you've got anywhere from 2 hours to maybe 6 hours of film, depending on what kind of day you had. If you had a day where you're chasing bugles all day long, you're rolling all day long. So there's tons. So then trying to condense that down into a watchable segment of video is hard. But then also to kind of leave in some of the same element of what Joe talked about, this expectation versus reality. Like when I edit, I try to leave in as much stuff to where people will kind of understand, like, hey, I might have to bugle a whole bunch before I ever hear an elk or see an elk or whatever, instead of just walk out, bugle, oh, heard one, and then 15 minutes later we're standing on top of an elk. I try to leave in as much of that as I can, that relevant stuff, to where, oh, why does he do this or why did he do that, and that way kind of pieces all that together. But I know, not to pick on the Primos guys, but which I've seen every single tape. I think that I own every Primos Truth Series elk hunt, but those are seem like more of a highlight reel.
You probably still own the VCR to play them too.
Well, you're damn right I do. Beta. I have the beta version.
The beta version.
If you're going to do it quality, man.
Right.
But, that was around for what, 1 year? Yeah.
But it was a good year, Joe. It was a good year.
It was a good year.
I mean, Dirk's correct. I mean, dude, I will ditto everything, but I'm gonna say you're being generous. I know mine. So my camera, when I'm filming, my camera has two 256 gig SD cards in it. Each one of those will handle, depending on what format, but most of the time I'm planning on 6 hours or so of video on each one. So I could literally film for 12 hours. There are some days, and multiple days, where I'm literally filling both of those cards and then coming back at night, downloading it into a hard drive, or flipping out the cards and going back out again. Yeah. And you take, so your hunt was over, let's just say one experience on this one animal. You found him the night before, and then you went in the next day and you worked him the next day, and then you finally caught up to him that evening. You might have legitimately 12 hours of content, and man, is there some really good stuff in there. How the heck do you take, now on my website, you folks know that I'll have an hour-long video. Geez, Pete, there's 4 more hours of stuff that's got to hit the cutting room floor. I've got one that I call it the 4-hour call-in. It took me 4 solid hours of play, active working this animal to get him 15 yards broadside. I can't show 4 hours. No one's going to sit there for 4 hours and watch that.
Well, let me correct you. I actually would, but I am a rare. I actually would.
So there's one of you out there.
One of me. It's worth it, right? I mean, I'll give you a like on YouTube.
There's so much. There's so much that hits the editing floor that, yeah, you're right. I mean, it became, social media made this a cliche, but never judge your behind the scenes with someone else's highlight reel. Well, of all the grind that you're doing, but you only see other people's highlights. That grind, all that turmoil, the crap that went through, That all happened on their hunt too. So it just all of a sudden the stars aligned and that little magic spark happened and we had a success here. But don't underestimate the grind and the crap that all went into the rest of it as well.
Ho, ho, ho. Are you guys thinking about getting some hunting gear for Christmas, whether it's for you, where you're going to be your own Santa Claus, or do you have a hunter in mind that you want to get some hunting gear for? Well, let me just tell you a couple of sponsors that we have here on the show that'll save you a little bit of money. And the first one being Hoffman Boots. My favorite go-to boot company out there is Hoffman. And let me tell you something. You are not chinsing out by getting you a set of Hoffman boots. I run the Explorers in the 8-inch. You can also get the 6-inch. You can get the Summit boots, which are really badass. And these boots, I've trusted these boots for years. This is not some new thing for me. I love my Hoffman boots. I've had all the big name brands of boots out there, and I can promise you that I will never buy anything but Hoffman again. Save you a little bit of money, because the Hoffmans aren't quite as expensive, but yet don't let that take away from the quality of these boots. They will last a long time, and they are worth every cent. And to make it even sweeter for you this holiday season, if you use the promo code Huntsman15, all caps lock, that's going to save you 15% at checkout. Great boots, great warranty, great product. Check it out at hoffmanboots.com. Moving right into the scree gear. Guys, you know I've run scree gear for a while now. If you listen to this show, I'm a big fan of scree. This is high-performance hunting attire and gear. It's scientifically tested camo patterns, and it's backed by a great company. They named the company after scree rock, and they changed the spelling on it. You know that shale rock kind of stuff you find at the bottom of base cliffs? That's where they got the name. And it's a Western hunting company. And here's what's cool right now. So they've got two patterns, and one of their patterns is called the Mountain Stealth, and that pattern is getting discontinued, much to my dismay, because that's what I run. I like the Mountain Stealth. It's a lot better for most of the terrain that I hunt in, but they are having they're doing away with it. So they've got a huge deal going on. It's like 30% off of the Mountain Stealth scree gear. So if you have the inclination to get outfitted for new camo for next year, go to screegear.com and check out anything in the Mountain Stealth. I highly recommend the Elite Starter Bundle. It's probably the best bang for your buck. And if you get it in the Mountain Stealth, I think that's going to run to like the last day of September. I've got September on my mind. I'm telling you right now. Last day of December, that 30% off is going to be taking place. So go check it out at screegear.com. Now, if you do use the Mountain Stealth, that is going to be a better discount than what my promo code can offer you. But I would ask, please mention in the comments somewhere that you did hear that at the Western Huntsman on the show. I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart when you do that. And if you're not using that and you need a promo code because you're going to get the other stuff, then use promo code the Western Huntsman, and that's going to save you 15% off and free shipping. It's a great deal, and you're going to love your scree gear. Last but not least is Phelps Game Calls. Phelps Game Calls is the go-to call company for the Western Huntsman, whether we're talking deer, bear, and especially elk. Phelps Game Call, those calls have put down more elk than the plague. And you guys, if you follow along with the whole brand of Phelps, it's a wonderful company story filled with great people. They do excellent products, excellent customer service, great warranties, great company. You just can't go wrong. Go to Phelps.com, use promo code Huntsman10 and save 10% off your Phelps calls for next season. It's coming up. I know we're in Christmas right now. It's Christmas, but September's going to be here before you know it. So go check it out at Phelps.com. Let's get back to the episode, guys. Thanks a bunch. We'll talk to you soon. Yeah, that's a good point, man.
People don't want to watch a grind. They don't want to watch a grind, man. They
want to watch. They want to watch arrows flying, man.
They want to see the juice, man. And that 12 hours ends up turning into between 5 and 10 minutes of actual video.
One of the most frustrating videos that, like you're talking about, they don't want to see the grind. And one of the most frustrating videos was this dude named Dirk Durham. He calls in this bull.
Which video?
Year, on his YouTube series from last year. He calls in this bull. And I get it. He wasn't a monster, but I mean, I would have shot him. I wouldn't have had any qualms. It's like his first day out, and this bull comes in, and he's got his arrow back when he's using a mouth, the mouth release. Is that what that was? The pull tab. Pull tab. Yeah.
I so want to see that, man. I want to see that, Dirk.
You got to watch that. He calls in this bull. He's got it dead to rights. This bull's right in front of him, just screaming his head off. And Dirk lets the bow down, and the bull is getting a little bit suspicious. He's like, "What was that?" Some dude's over there with a pull tab, and I'm pretty sure of it. But I'm going to kind of wander around here and bugle. And Dirk calls him in 3 different times, and then passes on him. And guys like me don't pass on bulls. You know what I mean? Because well, I'm just not super good at elk hunting. I'm hoping you guys are going to learn a little bit from me, but I'm just not that good at elk hunting, especially Chris. Yeah. But anyways,
I wouldn't say that. 2020 spanked me, so let's just move on.
No, but it does go to it does. I'm making jokes and stuff, but it speaks to this is an art, and this is a skill that people develop over years, and you guys have honed this art and this skill so well that you have this luxury sometimes where you have several days ahead of you. You're in good elk country. You're going to find more elk, and you're going to call in these bulls. And it made for a great video, man. And even the cameraman was upset. He fessed up about how upset he was at Dirk after that on one of his little behind the scenes video that Dirk didn't know he was taking. But that's entertaining stuff, right? That is entertaining stuff for people to watch. But the part that needs to be highlighted, that what Joe was talking about, is how much time and effort goes into making these some of these videos are 20 minutes, some of these videos are 40 minutes, some of them are an hour, and it's so much work, and that expectation level that Joe was talking about, where people are coming from back east and they think, oh man, I'm going to go out and 20 minutes from the truck, I'm going to call in a big bugling bull. He's going to be blowing snot and eyes rolling back in his head, and I'm going to stick an arrow in him, and we're going to pack him out. It's going to be great. And so I think there is that element to it that maybe misleads people to what the real, or I guess the reality of elk hunting truly is. Chris, what, from your perspective, I asked Joe this, what do elk hunters mess up the most? What is their biggest mistake?
And that one is a little bit more difficult for me, because there's some things that they do. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. You've got stuff that they do before an animal's there, and then they've got stuff that they can do when the animal is there. I will say that, and I've talked about this before, I really think that one of the things that just crucifies folks' success is their lack of confidence in knowing what they are doing and why. And the reason why I say that is that translates into confidence in their calling setups and their strategies, and letting the setup work. Yeah. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have been either with folks, or even in the early days for me, I would sit up on an animal, start calling, start working them, or whatever. They're working their way to me. All of a sudden they go quiet, or they just stall, and I think, oh, something must have happened. Oh, I must have spooked them. Oh, they must have smelled me. Oh, all these things start going in your head, because in your mind, in the heat of the moment, there, for a lot of people, everything all of a sudden, it just seems like everything. 5 seconds feels like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so now I need to, why isn't he here? He should be here. He needs to hear. I need to move. I need to adjust. Hold on. Mm-hmm. If that animal was 300 yards away, he bugled at you. You moved up 100 yards and you checked in with him again. And now, he's right there. He was moving to you while you were moving. Right. And so if he's interested and the wind is right, you've been calling, he's been responding to your calling, he's been moving your way. Now, we could talk about setups, but if your setup is right, or if you even have a decent setup, do not panic and just automatically think that, oh, something got screwed up, I need to move. No, just let it play out for a minute. Give it a few minutes, several minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay.
I can't tell you the number of times. Go ahead.
Let me stop you for just a minute on that point, because that is something that I really noticed this last season with a lot of hunters in this particular unit that I was hunting that was super crowded. Do you guys, and Chris, you answer first, but I want to hear everybody's response to this. Do you guys, is it in your mind that you are calling to an elk and when he's responding, you move to him, or do you call the bull to you? Does that make sense how I asked that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
The question makes sense, and the answer is yes.
On both. On both. And the reason I asked that is because I called in a bunch of hunters this year. I called in a ton of hunters. Like they just came right to me. And I feel like they were just moving too much, but I could be wrong. You guys are the experts. So talk about it.
Number one, kudos to you that you sound good enough that you were fooling people. And I'm not joking.
I'm kind of like the Charlie Daniels of bugling, if we're being honest.
I'm gonna have to see that beard. I'm gonna have to see that beard.
I'm totally kidding. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
So, yeah, I mean, it depends on distance. It depends on terrain. It depends on how eager that animal is. There's been literally, I could show you down in Arizona where we're literally sitting on a knob and I'm calling bulls up to us 15 yards away from legitimately half a mile away. These things are fired up, and all I need to do is just sit there and just crank the calls and let them just come. There's other times where you got a herd bull, he's in thick cover with his cows, he's going nowhere. So you might have to get close to them to make something happen. So you're going to have to take the temperature of the animal you're dealing with, but by all means, if you're calling and you can hear them coming to you, why change in my opinion, why change the recipe that if he's responding, he's coming, and this gives you time to make sure your setup is good, let him come. If he's, and I say him, most of it, okay, let's just say this right now. A lot of us the vast majority of people are going after bulls, but the same thing goes with cows. If you're cow hunting and you're calling, same thing goes. If they're responding and they're moving your way, same thing goes. But I'm going to default to bulls because that's what I hunt most.
Yeah, we'll just put that under the guise of we're talking mainly calling in bull elk.
Sure. So if they're working, in my opinion, if they're working to you, then you make sure your setup is good. You make sure you got that continuity. You make sure you just keep feeding him what he wants. And let him come. If he stalls and he's out there and you can tell that he's just not going to cut loose from wherever it is he is, then okay, fine. Then if I can strategically do so, I'm going to work and I'm going to move forward. But this is where it ties into what I was just saying. There are some times where the terrain or the habitat, if I'm down in Arizona in the big ponderosas, that's open habitat. They can see a couple hundred yards through a lot of that timber. So there are times where he's hung up. The temptation is for me to move. Mm-hmm. I'm only going to move if I know I can do so undercover without being seen. But
or
there are
correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many times where if people would just say, okay, listen, he is interested. He is responding. He's not leaving. He's not going anywhere. Okay, I can't, and under good strategic considerations, I am at a disadvantage if I move. Okay, then just slow it down and just let that bull come. It might take him an hour to work his way to you, but just let him come.
But see, that's the problem, Chris. I think what Jim is saying, though, is that he's talking about the fact that there's a lot of hunters in the area that he's calling in. And so his concern is that is somebody else going to jump in on his setup if he sits back in that hour waiting for that animal to come in because
Yeah,
he's going to come in.
Correct. I will absolutely. Yeah, I will absolutely I will give you every ounce of that consideration. You're right. And I will take this criticism. I will make this criticism of myself. I know I am a more conservative-minded hunter, and if I have a fault, I am not aggressive enough sometimes. But the problem is sometimes people think they need to be aggressive when they actually don't. And that aggressiveness ends up, you bump them, you spook them, they see you or whatever. And then now you've blown that setup, and now you've altered that individual or that group. You've altered their behavior now. They know that there's danger. They're going to flee from that situation. And now you've got to let that entire thing reset and hope to get back on them.
Gotcha.
And I will say, if some people will see this as a criticism, they will say, I'm not aggressive enough and I didn't make something happen. Whereas my argument in my mind and what I will respond to them is, okay, if I always assume someone else is going to screw it up, then what I end up doing is, by default, in my experience, I end up being the guy that screws them up. Whereas if I just let the thing play out, oftentimes if it doesn't work or all of a sudden I hear other hunters coming up the hill, fine, I'm done. I'll shut up. I'll move out. I'll just let it all just let it dissolve into nothing. Because if I can let it dissolve and go away,
I'm a little more mischievous, man. I flat out call them in.
There you go. That's why. Yeah, there you go.
I call them in, and it's only because it's I got a lot of it's really important to me to have fun on the mountain, and I get a big kick out of seeing that look of disappointment when they come through the brush and it's just that some dude standing there in a half gray beard calling them in. But that my question, I think it also and again, I want to get everybody's take on this, but they sometimes, these hunters, when they get a response, and it's me, so I'm noticing, I'm watching the situation, I'm learning, and a lot of times I'm trying to figure out, is that a bull or is that a hunter? And they come in so fast, it's like a teenager at prom, you know what I mean? They're so fast. And I'm just
depending
curious
on the time of year. Yeah, I mean, that just depends. I mean, if you're early season and they're in that buddy mode, some of them just mosey forever before they get there in elk time. I mean,
yeah, very true.
Now you're when they're hot and heavy and and you've got good bull to cow ratio and they're aggressive, that's a whole different ball game. And when what Chris was talking about there, that half mile deal, like me, I'm very ultra aggressive, and I'm one of those guys that Chris is talking about that sometimes I end up blowing things up trying to get into a situation. It's a fine line. But if that critter's coming at a half mile and he's coming across an open area where I see that he's coming over to the trees, that's a whole different deal. But if I have one when I talk and he sounds off and he's a half mile away, I don't say another word, but I'm cutting the distance like crazy, man. I want that 200 yards. I want that 300 yards, but I'm taking in information as I'm doing that. It's not just helter skelter and then looking to blowing up. As I'm moving, man, I mean, everything is tuned in. Do I get another noise? Do I get another sound? Do I hear a cow call? Is there something that's going to, let me know that bull's coming into me? And hopefully he's going to talk as he's doing that. If he did an answer, depending on what he answered, that's going to give me more information. That's the whole key, is the more information. But when I have those guys that are far away like that, where I hunt, I do not want to be back a half mile away from him screaming, because I attract too much attention, and I know I do because I've seen it happen, like what you're talking about. If I was in a situation where it's midday and I'm midday and and I have an animal that sounds off in the trees, and I'm doing what I call a static setup, because I think there's dynamic and static setups. You got those ones that are just like, dynamic, as when we're moving in and things change constantly. All your information is changing, your mind is changing, your strategy is changing, all because of wind, because of animal, because of reaction, because of sounds. But when I have that midday thing and I get a bull to sound off and he's a half mile there and I've got everything set up in my static setup, I'm exactly what Chris is talking about, man, because I don't have to worry about another hunter coming in that setup, because nobody's out in the middle of the day.
That's
they're
awesome.
all back.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I noticed that too. I'm the only hunter on the mountain from like 10 to 2 o'clock, and I love it. What about you, Dirk? You got something to throw in on that one? Do you?
Well, I'd like to quote the late great Kenny Rogers, and you got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to hold them.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I want to hear you. I actually want to hear you sing that.
I want to hear the tune.
Yeah, hear the
On a warm summer's eve.
God, you guys, you didn't do it.
We were both too tired to sleep. Oh man, Can you believe 2020 took Kenny Rogers from us? I'm upset about it. Anyway,
I can. 2020 can just. Yeah, no.
2020 can.
I was going to say
flat out go to hell.
I was going to say Dirk. I'll be your Dolly Parton to your Kenny Rogers. Go.
You're going to have to work on that a little bit.
And he has the hair for it. He does have the hair for it.
Talking about my voice, Dirk. I'm talking about my voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? You guys are both right. I have to agree with Chris and Joe both. But it's that reading that, and Chris said it, reading that temperature of the elk. Mm-hmm. There's sometimes, and then terrain too. There's sometimes there's some really difficult terrain maybe, and it's like, maybe I don't want to walk over there, right? So maybe I'm going to slow play this a little bit and just see if that bull will come my way before I invest a bunch of time, like crossing some nasty stuff to go to him. Maybe I can bring him over to me. I'll kind of slow play that. Or maybe let's say he's in a pretty good spot over there, but he just doesn't sound that interested. Okay, well, I'm going to mark him and I'm going to go right to him. Now, let's say that thing is ripping bugles and eating up everything I have to say, and he's not super far away. Let's say he's a few hundred yards away, and he seems to be coming my way. I'm like Chris. I'm going to keep feeding him whatever it is that he's responding to. So I think the one big problem for a lot of new hunters is, and this kind of goes about what Joe said. They don't have enough experience or enough reps in the woods and enough interactions with the elk to know if they're doing it right. They may be going out and hunting and doing everything perfectly, but maybe they're hunting in a place there's no elk, or there's very little elk. And so they think they might be doing it wrong when they're probably doing it right. They just need to change locations. And I think one of the biggest mistakes for a lot of hunters is they give up.
Right.
They may be doing things right, but they haven't allowed that, like Chris said, they haven't allowed their techniques or tactics to work. They don't know if what they're doing is right or wrong, and because they haven't had that interaction with an elk to prove it. And then they just say, you know what, I go home, or I'm going to quit doing this tactic, whatever that tactic is. This doesn't work. So then they kind of default back to whatever they feel comfortable with, is, whether that's spot and stalk or sitting on a water hole or whatever, which are all viable means to kill an elk. But I feel like it really, sometimes people really kind of give up, or just kind of shoot themselves in the foot just by not knowing if their tactics are working or not. And some people get kind of stuck in that rut of, well, there was elk here this summer, and I know the elk are going to be here, and I'm just going to keep hunting that same spot, and they don't leave that spot. So if they do, maybe they don't give up, but they just continue hitting that same old spot again, hoping that the elk will magically appear instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to get the hell out of here and go find somewhere where there are elk that bugle.
Yeah.
And for me, that's
So-
been like all the difference is relocation and finding elk that will bugle.
I got a question on that point for you guys. Like, and this is coming from like a genuine place in terms of elk hunters that are, more mediocre level like me, right? Let's put it the average. We're not elk slayers, that tag out 1 to 5 times a year. When you bump an elk, okay, you're like you were just talking. You got to find the elk. If don't fall in love with one just spot because you think there's elk there because you saw one 2 months ago or last season or whatever the case is. But let's say you are in an area where you have found elk, you're getting responses, and maybe you don't have the proper setup, or maybe you move wrong, or the wind shifts and you bump some elk. How long is that area dead for once you bump those elk out of there?
I think that's situational as far as geography. A lot of times, depends on how big the country is and what it looks like and where they went,
and what resources are there. Their food, their water. Yeah.
Right.
How much experience they have with human disturbance on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, good one. Yep.
Some of the areas that I find that, because most people, they pay attention to where the food is, where the water is, where the bedding areas are. And I think a lot of times one of the huge areas that we miss are those transition areas, those corridors, those areas between there that they constantly, they might bed in a different place up on the same ridge or within a half mile or even a mile on that same ridge. But a lot of times they use those same corridors that they understand to get from point A to point B on that. So, they're going to move around in different areas. If they're catching enough scent in an area, it's going to push them a little bit. But one thing that I have found is there's a difference between high use and low use areas. And what I mean by that is there's some areas like you take Colorado, for example. All these guys, everybody goes to get way up high in Colorado thinking that there's some place where people never go. And so these animals are going to be, undisturbed. Well, Colorado is one of the highest usage states that there is for hikers, bikers, travelers, all of that. So
Hippies.
A lot of these elk, well, hey, don't talk about me like that, man.
Who said that? Who just said hippie?
And, a lot of these animals, these elk are used to, look at Estes Park. Look at all the videos that we see and all these elk in towns and within housing areas, or they come down around farms and around houses. They're used to human scent. So, especially in high use areas. So it's not necessarily that when you bump them or that they smell you, that it's just going to blow them out of an area. What really freaks them out is when they smell you 30 yards away from them and they didn't know you were there. So that kind of has little impact. But I guarantee you most bulls that I have called in or that I've worked in the area that I hunt have probably already been bumped by hunters multiple times during that week.
Yes.
And so it's really hard.
That's really interesting. All of that is really interesting because I guess I have that question formulated in my mind because going back to where I told you guys where I stuck that bull this last season and never found him, whatever, I actually called that bull in like 3 different times before I finally got an arrow in him over a 7-day period. And he never moved really that far.
I called in one bull, Jim. I called him one bull 4 days straight, shoot him away 3 times, shoot him, and still called him in and finally killed him on the 4th day because I got so frustrated with him.
He deserved it, right?
Yes, sir.
he was probably a Britney Spears fan. But
Is that why that elk farm got mad at you? And what's that?
Well, I tried to cover the camera as I was going by it there for you. Okay, so
it was Ernie's Elk Zoo in New Mexico.
I don't think it was the issue of the elk. I think it's when you cut their fence. I think that's just that they were just upset about the fence.
that's what it was.
Okay.
So Jim, one thing that I'll say, so this year I've done a lot more this year, and then I've done it in the past a little bit, but let's say we spooked a bull, whether he saw us when we got him in close, he saw the shooter or saw the caller, or maybe caught a whiff, we get that little swirl of a wind. We kind of started doing this year a lot more. Was we just kind of sat down right there wherever we spooked them, we just sat down for a minute, for 30 minutes or an hour, and just to kind of see what developed. And a lot of times an hour later, that thing starts bugling again on his own, or I'll start bugling.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll move position a little bit and start bugling, and then boom, it's like game on again. And I always wonder when a bull smells you, I always wonder, does he think that's a hunter trying to call me in, or does he think, oh man, I was trying to fight this other elk, and all of a sudden some dude walks up?
Yeah, that's funny. I wonder that same thing. Like, what do they think? Is that like, okay, that elk up there that's bugling, that's where that wind's coming from, man, he's screwed. I'm getting out of here. He's on his own, every man for himself. Or do they think that smell is where that bugle is coming from? I always wonder that. And it's so hard to know. Chris, you're the behavioralist. Like, what do you think about that?
I think it can go both ways. I agree with Dirk wholeheartedly. I'm glad to hear that.
What if Chris, the elk, you're in a bugle match with the elk, and he comes through the brush, and you're standing there, and maybe you didn't have your bow drawn, so you draw the bow, and he sees you draw the bow and takes off down the mountain. Do you think he relates the sound that he heard to you drawing your bow? Or I'm sorry, drawing your bow. Sorry, I misspoke.
No, I got you. No, I don't think that's going to be the case, because quite honestly, my mind, if you think about that scenario, let's just say if you're going to be bugling and he's bugling at you, you're going back and forth, you bugle, he's responding, he's coming in. At some point, you're going to drop that bugle. You're going to get your arrow knocked, your release on the string. You're going to start ranging stuff. You're going to get ready, and you're going to get ready to draw your bow, and that bull finally comes in. So there is a moment in time, whether it's 30 seconds or 3 minutes, whatever, there is a moment of time where that bull is not hearing a bugle. He's responding to the bugle he just heard a moment ago, but he doesn't know what's going on between that last moment of hearing that bull and when he's walking in. And to Dirk's point of, all of us, he starts bugle later. Yeah, he comes in and sees motion that he doesn't know about. He's like, what the hell is that? That seems wrong. He bolts out of there. Sometimes, they can just bolt and leave. This is where, in my opinion, I do not call after that, but like right then and there, you'll hear people mew, 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 or they'll bugle right away. No, I don't. Me personally, I don't normally do that.
If the elk busts you, that's what you're saying. Yeah. If the elk busts you, you shut up.
I just let him go. I don't want to confirm that I'm the sound he was listening to and that there's danger right there. If he just saw danger and spooked from danger, if I truly was an elk that he was responding to, well, obviously the other elk would probably be disturbed by that danger. I'm just going to let them settle down. But sometimes if they're in the heavy pressured area, I've got a YouTube video of my own on it where we bumped this group of elk 2, 3 times, maybe 4 times, softly, nothing major. And then the bull comes in. I make a horrible shot. I miss him. He goes off. I see him. I'm like, whatever. Okay, I'm done. And I literally go over to get my arrow, and I completely forgot about the bull's cows. Those cows see me, And it was like you could just see in their entire attitude and disposition. They're like, that's it. We're done. We're out of here. And they literally, and this was an alpine bull, and so it was the beautiful part about me being able to film it, they just left the entire valley. They left the region. They're like, screw a bunch of this. We're done. And they just left. So it depends on the animal that you're dealing with and how many times they have had that encounter and that experience. I responded to an elk sound. There was danger. I responded to another elk sound. Oh, there's danger. I responded to another elk sound. There's more danger. Screw a bunch of this. I'm out. Versus I responded elk sound. Oh crap, there's danger. I run away and I'm like, well, shoot, that's never happened before. Well, I don't know what that was about. Screw it. Who else is out here? And they go back to doing whatever they're doing.
So they just kind of go back to it. And so okay. You guys trigger my
ADD.
ADD, all that kind of stuff that I'm famous for. But so when you're talking about a bull or elk, whether we're cow hunting or bull hunting, and you just like you were talking about the two different levels of spooking them, right? You the one that is just kind of uncomfortable and leaves, and versus the one that like physically saw you. Like one time this last season, I stepped around a tree, big old drop tine bull, 20 yards from me. We make eye contact, and that dude ended up in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. By the time, I know he left. I'm talking about the ones that you just slightly make uncomfortable, whether it's visual or they smell something or they hear something that they don't like. And this is how Dirk got that bull in New Mexico. Is I kind of did that to a bull up here in North Idaho, and he ended up in New Mexico and right in front of Dirk. And so that's I guess what my question is. How far do these guys run? How far do they go when you just make them uncomfortable and they leave? Are they going miles? Are they going a half a mile? Are they going how far do you think they're going?
It depends on how thick the area is. From what I've seen, I have actually seen bulls get spooked. I have watched bulls get spooked and only go 300 yards, stop up where they could view, where they're up on that about 2/3 on a ridge or up on the ridge where they can look back and just wait it out to see, watching their back trail and to see what happens. There's a lot. I'll give you another example. What Chris was talking about, how you don't scream or bugle, where I've done just the opposite. And that's like, if I'm working in on a bull and I have a whole bunch of elk in an area, and all of a sudden a satellite, how many times have you had tunnel vision and a satellite bull is right off to your left or right, and that bull starts to booger and go towards the herd, and it's like, oh man, everything's going to get blown up now. And
that's a fair point.
And what I've done in that situation, man, is I sounded like I put the biggest, gnarliest scream, like I was the one that was another bull that caused that bull to run off like that. And when the other elk see that and connect that big bull with that one running off, I paint that picture that, it was another elk that sent him off. And I've had that work for me like that. So that's an example of that. But, I don't think they go. It depends on how thick it is. I mean, if there's a real open area where they can see that, they're just going to keep trucking until they get up on a ridge where they're secure, or where they get in an area where they've got wind in their favor. It just depends. There's so many variables to that. But I've only seen them go sometimes 200-300 yards and stop and wait.
Yep.
I got one for you, Jim. So this last fall, 2020, I called in a bull for the shooter. The shooter shot, and he hit high and a little forward, hit this bull high in the scapula. Arrow didn't penetrate, about 3 or 4 inches. Bull runs off. Well, we're hunting the same spot the next day and get a bull bugling. And I'll be darned if it's not the same bull. I mean, you can recognize, you know how you can recognize their voice. Bulls have a certain way they bugle. So he's bugling.
Yeah, they do.
Absolutely.
And this time we get him going, and he's a little more call shy. Bugle and run. Finally, we get him worked up, and he kind of stands his ground, and we get up close, and we're under 100 yards from this bull and get set up. Dusty can see the bull's antlers, and I rip the bull's screaming. I rip a big scream. I pick up a stick and beat the crap out of a tree with it. And as soon as I started beating the crap out of that tree, that bull shut up and ran off. Well, rewind to the day before when that bull got hit, I was beating the crap out of a tree right at that very moment.
Ah, gotcha.
I almost think that bull might have associated that sound, that same old dry stick hitting a frickin' another dry tree, that he associated that with that pain or that moment in time, maybe. But let's just say, that bull was shot. He was on the same ridge that he was on the day before, just on the other side of the ridge. So
he just come back. Yeah.
Yeah. He was in his same home range, his same little area, his core area. He hadn't left. So, I think sometimes it's just situational. Sometimes, like Chris was saying, sometimes those things change zip codes, and sometimes they just run over the hill a little ways, 100, 300, 400 yards.
Yeah. And I think another point that Chris made that was important, though, is you can spook a bull and he'll stick in the area. You spook those cows, the bulls are gone. Because those cows are gone, man.
He was well behind those cows. On the video, you watch the cows are strung out, probably 200 plus yards in front of this bull, and the bull he's just a nice canter, a nice gallop behind him, and you can tell his disposition is like, where are we going? He's just like, okay, this is, I guess, where we're going. And the meanwhile, the cows are like, we're done. Now, hey, Dirk, if you don't mind, you want me to tell you why? No.
I'd love
rephrase. Let me rephrase my statement. I can lend some scientific credibility to your observation on why that might have happened.
Oh, give us the juice, Chris. Give us the juice.
I like it. We're getting deep.
Because there is, in layman's terms, there is scientific evidence to support the fact that if you encounter a situation and your emotions and or your adrenaline stay at nominative levels or low levels, you can experience a situation, whether it's traumatic or it's happy, whether it's doesn't matter. And your brain will register that, and you may or may not remember it. Maybe sometimes a neutral experience will take you 2 or 3 times of experiencing it in order for it to become a hard, fast memory to where your brain is hardwired to say, oh, I recognize this scenario, and this is what it means, or this is what I should do. Whereas, if your adrenaline spikes, there is hormonally that experience. If you have an experience that will spike your adrenaline, oftentimes you will encode that experience in your brain, and it will become hardwired right now, and it becomes codified into your experience because of the interaction of the hormones coursing through their body. So that bull, heard if he was responding to you raking on that tree, and that was part of the experience he was responding to, and then all of a sudden he just got smacked with this hard, sharp pain in the shoulder. I don't know if he saw you. I don't know if he heard you guys. I don't know if he smelled you guys, or if you tried to follow up or moved, or he heard you after, whatever. But if that spiked his adrenaline, you're darn right that all of a sudden that experience could have absolutely been just seared in his brain and his memory and experiences to where the next time he heard that, he's like, screw a bunch of this. Yeah, I remember exactly what happened last time. So there's absolutely a physiological response that could be a reason for your subsequent encounter.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Super interesting. Yeah, super interesting.
Just like when you hear that old Just like when you hear that same old song from Prom Night, 1987, Chris, and you get that old time loving feeling again.
Hey, wait,
you know,
were you
now,
there?
I think
I was going to say 1987. I graduated in 1990. How old are you?
I'm so
I thought you
glad.
were in 87.
You know what? I was struggling with it at first, and Dirk, that made total sense, and I'm right there now. So.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, Uncle Joe graduated in like 1950. I'm pretty sure.
Just because my beard is distinguished with highlights of its own doesn't mean I'm that old. I'm not Joe old. Come on.
Do you, Chris? The question I have for Chris is like, when you use Just for Men in your beard, does that help with the camouflage and the perception, like the depth perception? I feel like there's something there.
No. It's not the camouflage. I use it like windjammer for their scent.
Yeah.
It completely confuses their sense of scent. And quite honestly, the ladies are quite enamored. And if I can bring the ladies in, the bulls just follow.
So, absolutely, man. You know what? This whole conversation all the time about bulls, and Chris hit it right on the head, man. It's all about the gals.
It's correct.
Okay, that brings me to a pretty saucy question I've been thinking about because of some of the dynamics I know about the three of you. What about Chris?
Oh dear.
Are you cow calling to these bulls, or are you going to bugle to them? And don't give me them, well, it's situational, Jim. Come on.
You know darn well the answer to that question. Because I do. I will absolutely use bugles to everybody calls quote unquote locate. I will use bugles when the situation is right, but you're absolutely right. I'm the kind of one of the few odd men out as far as I do lean heavy on cow vocalizations because my calling style is one that I try to play to the base level communication of elk. And the base level communication is what we typically call quote unquote cow vocalizations. And I say air quotes around cow because a bull calf, a 1.5-year-old bull that's in with a cow calf group, he's going to use and understand all the same mews, chirps, lost mews, assembly mews, whines. All of those are going to be standard vocalizations that he hears 365 days a year for at least the first 1.5 years of his life before he finally gets kicked out and pushed out on his own. I'm not detracting from bull vocalization strategies. In some places in southern Colorado, that's what I use. I killed the very biggest bull I've ever killed in my life, bugling him in. But the vast majority of times, to start my encounter, no, can't say that. I will oftentimes give what I call a contact bugle, a level 1 contact bugle. Start high, fall off low, to quote unquote locate, just get somebody to respond. And if he responds and I can pinpoint his location, I will move to where I think I'm within 150 to 200 yards of that animal. And oftentimes that is when 99% of the time I'm going to switch to a cow calling strategy. I'm going to use a targeted strategy most of the time. I'm going to appeal to that base level communication first and then work my way up. So I'm a little different than other guys.
Okay. So lover, you're more on the lover, not a fighter kind of side. Correct. And it's legitimate. I'm not here to say anybody's right or wrong because you guys all kill crazy amounts of bulls. So, that's and I already knew that about you, Chris. And so
I know you did.
That was a loaded question.
Yeah, that's right. Kabang.
No, I don't. I'll say, what am I, CNN?
Yeah. You're not that good looking. No,
at least you're honest.
Correct. So the lover fighter thing, there's an element of truth in there. I do not default to a more aggressive strategy, but my conversation is not geared towards those that are necessarily a lover. What I'm doing is I'm just speaking to the individual and telling them exactly what I want them to do on a new. You and I think we talked about it, and I shared this, I think, with also the Elk Collective and on my stuff is,
yeah,
I want to come in neutral. I actually tell people, disregard testosterone, forget testosterone, screw it. It's a wild card. I'm going to go under testosterone, and I'm going to go to the base level communication that they're hardwired to respond to. Now, that can mean I'm talking to a bull that's generally more of a lover. That might actually mean I'm talking to a bull that's a little bit more of a fighter. But both of those scenarios, that base level communication is what they understand. Now, their individual disposition and who they're with and where they are in the pecking order and whether or not they've been, but all those little nuances later on, like we talked about, taking the test, temperature of the bull that you're with. Mm-hmm. I can start at that base level. And if the base level doesn't perform, I can always move up into a more aggressive or more intensive scenario.
Okay. That makes sense. It's kind of like, yeah. So it's not exactly Rocky, and it's not exactly Debbie Does Dallas. It's kind of right in between.
Well, what it
you have an eclectic video set there, buddy.
What it does is it allows you to make changes, man. I mean,
there you go.
When you start off with a cow call first, and for me, it's a little bit different because I'm a near to far guy. So. And I'm lover before fighter based as well because I want to set the tone and be able to have alternatives. So when I say near to far, what I mean by that is when I'm working through the woods, if I go and scream out a call and an animal's right there and I sound like I'm a lot closer than I am, I'm already creating a hang up situation possibly there, or I'm freaking them out. There's all kinds of things that I can do with that. And so I always like to give just a little mouth sweet cow call. Get no response there, then I might go grunt tube out with a cow call. And I get nothing from it because a cow call is a location call as well. I get a lot of responses where I'm able to locate animals where they'll mew back to me, whether it is a bow call or a bull mew, or whether it's a cow from a herd letting me locate them. But I'm exactly with what Chris says is when I do a cow call and I get a response, now I have alternatives. If now I want to introduce a bull, but not introduce a bull that's in a challenging way, but maybe introduce a bull that's in a breeding sequence type way so that I'm not directing to the bull that has responded to me. I'm not engaging that bull. I'm having my own little scenario telling him, hey, I'm busy here, guy. So it gives me alternatives when I sit with a cow because they know that there's either a bull mewing there or there's a cow mewing there, and it allows me to respond to how they respond. Just a lot like what Chris is saying with that base layer.
Gotcha. What about you, Dirk? What do you say?
So I conduct an experiment every time. So this is an experiment of what are they going to answer to? And I'm with you guys. I'll start out. A lot of times it's just a really quiet cow call. Because if, I hunt a lot of thick country, there may be an elk really close to me, and I don't want to scare the bejeebies out of this thing. So I'm going to make a very quiet call to where if they're close by, they may vocalize or rustle the brush or something and then kind of give away their location. I'll wait a little bit. Then I'm going to vocalize a little louder this time with a louder cow call, whether it's just louder without a tube or with a tube, just to kind of broadcast it out, depending on the area. If I haven't heard nothing then I'm going to do that kind of a location bugle like Chris described, just kind of the high to low type, non-aggressive type call, and then kind of play it from there. But once I make contact with a bull and he starts picking up what I'm putting down, let's say he likes my bugles and my cow calls. Maybe he don't like my cow calls at all. There's times in in places I've hunted where bulls will not bugle at a cow call. I can't explain it. I don't know why. There's not a lot of cows there. Maybe they're like, that's fake news, that there's no cows here. They don't believe it. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. But, you know, there's a lot of times it's in areas that have low cow densities and they won't even answer a cow call. But
I have a feeling you're talking about North Idaho with that one.
Yeah, that most of the time there. But what I do is, as I'm building this rapport with this bull with bugles, anytime he answers, especially if we're not in that really thick of things where he's like cutting me off and I'm cutting him off. Let's say we're just kind of starting to we've lit the match. Now we're kind of blowing on the fire a little bit, trying to just warm things up. Every time he answers, instead of me answering immediately with my bugle, I start answering with a cow calls. And I don't know what you call them. You know, Chris probably has an idea, but I'm going to have these cow calls that are a lot more yearning, like, hey, we like you. Come over here. This guy's a jerk. This is kind of what I'm in my mind is the picture I'm painting. This guy's a jerk, and get over here and save us, right?
Yeah.
So I try to paint that picture to the bull, and then when he answers, or then after I've done those cow calls, I'll wait a little bit and then I'll bugle. But as things go along, once that bull starts answering my cow calls, then it's hammer time. A lot of times I'll start cutting him off, like, hey, you know, talk to my ladies. And about 60% of the time, it works every time. No, just kidding. But
you're at 60? You think 60?
It's like 6% of the time for me, fellas. So that's that's great.
Like the other guy said, you know, I start low. I don't. You know, there's some guys out there that will lead you to believe that their teachings that, like, okay, here's the deal. We had an elk bugle. He's right over there. We're gonna close the gap, get up close. We're gonna cow call, and as soon as he answers, we're gonna step all over him. And every time that he vocalizes, we're gonna step all over him with a big challenge bugle. With a challenge bugle. Yeah. And
no patience. Yeah.
That works sometimes. But that's not the silver bullet. I feel like there's never any silver bullets. Maybe you got a whole gun full of silver bullets, but they all have a different name on them, right? You never know which one's gonna be the one that's gonna kill, right? So
absolutely.
That's why I kind of like to do the experimentation of what kind of vocalization, what kind of elk sounds does he like to hear, and then kind of play upon that and let him maybe escalate the situation. It seems like for me, if I can kind of build the situation like that, rather than having, it's more of a instead of having a reactive situation. Let's say we jumped an elk, a bull, and he cow call and he bugles, and he's just right there. A lot of times, that reactive situation, a lot of times, 90% of the time, we don't see that bull again or even call him in. But if we can start at a little bit of a distance and kind of slowly build this game up to where he's finally gets so pissed off. Number one, he's mad at me for saying all these mean things to him, and he knows there's girls over there to come fight for, then he'll come. So that's kind of the way I see it. But it's funny that it's different every time. I mean, I hate to sound cliche, but there's bulls that works good on, and there's bulls that don't work at all. And gosh, in New Mexico this year, we spent 7 days of trying every single thing I've ever known or learned about elk, and none of it worked until day 8. And then it's just like, oh, okay, I guess.
Do elk
Mexican elk?
Do elk live in New Mexico? I mean, like
I've heard they do. But
without divulging too much, what part of New Mexico were you in there, Dirk?
He took a right.
Were you north or south?
He took a right in Albuquerque. He told me that earlier.
The mountain
right
part.
in Albuquerque.
I took a right at Albuquerque. Yeah. It was mountainous. It was close to the Gila, so it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't in the Gila. It was right at the edge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But it finally one day the switch flipped and the elk started acting like normal elk. But I think there was a lot of different reasons why they weren't earlier. But
Dirk's coordinates are going to be in the show notes.
Right.
Yeah,
I'll never go back there, but I don't want to screw it up for the people who do like to go out there. So
Right. Yeah. And, I want to back up the whole thing too, because we keep talking about, these animals that they respond and they give us a response back. And, you keep going earlier in that season, you go the first part of September. One of my favorite things to do is I'm just moving through and I'm cow calling, just sounding like a little small chirp, some little mews, just sound like a small herd moving through, and have killed tons of elk coming in silently that way, where they're not saying anything. So, it just, a lot of those variables come in at different times.
Yeah, very, very good point.
Yeah, very true. Very true. That's so. This is going to be a hard question to ask, but it's on that point. Like when you are in that situation, and you've got a response from a bull. He's just kind of responding. He's letting you know. It's not like some crazy pissed off bugle or anything like that. But I think what a lot of people wonder in their mind is, how do you know whether we go Rocky or Debbie does Dallas? Like, is there a way, like the
elk
vocalization?
Tell you, man. They tell you.
Okay, but how do they tell you? Is it just in? I know. I am asking. For. I think that something for. Well, let me put it to you this way. I think it's fair to say that you all, actually all four of us, have over 30 years of experience hunting, right? So sometimes when we talk about things, we look at them from the perspective of, this is just super obvious, right? This is stuff we've known since we were kids or whatever. How does the guy that is coming from, North Carolina, that's hunting elk for the first time in his life, or maybe he grew up in New Mexico, and this is going to be, he's interested in learning how to elk hunt, and he's going out there and he gets this response. Walk that guy, these fresh eyes on the elk country, the elk terrain. He's never heard this is the first time he's heard an elk bugle back at him. How do you describe it to that person? I always gotta say this. I keep using the term guy or dude. Let's just say hunter. This hunter, first time hearing an elk bugle, these vocalizations are a brand new thing to him. How do you describe it to that individual?
Look, I came from a family of 6 kids, and I could always tell when mom, dad, no matter where they were in the house, outside, I could tell whether they were calling me, whether they were requesting my attention, or where they were ticked at me, just because of the emotion and how they did it. I think every person can read how an elk's emotion is, because it's so much like how we react to each other. Whether that is just, when you hear and you go and listen, go to like Chris's site, and you can hear, what it's like when a bull is just doing a basic location bugle, or when he's just responding, or when he's starting to scream a little bit and getting that vibrato, that in that voice.
Kind of that growl.
When my dad, oh my, when my dad says, my dad says, "Hey Joe, come on over here," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll be there in a second." But my dad goes, "I said to get over here." I'm like there right now, because
yeah.
He, and it's the same thing. It's like how quick it comes to you, how harsh it comes to you, tells you what their emotion is. And so if I have a bull that just, like Chris said with that basic bugle before, and just says like that, I'm going to go, "Oh, get over here." And, I do that. I'm just like smacking him in the face, and he's not in that mood. He's not worked up there right now. And that's what Dirk was talking about before. You have an animal that responds, you close into, we're going to go over that hill. I'm going to cow call when he responds. I'm going to scream at him. Well, why? Man, you've just gone into the bar. You've just found a guy in there that turned and communicated a little bit, and you went and popped him in the mouth. it's... The elk will tell you. They will tell you exactly where they are. And I tell people, and I've heard people say that you don't do this, but look, I tell people a lot of times that you if you are unsure, you can mimic how that bull responds to you with the same tone, if not just a little bit less than what they have, man. And, some people say, well, you don't know what you're saying to them. I have some friends from Venezuela. We call them the mafia, man.
Yeah, the Venezuela
and when
mafia.
yeah. And, and when they came to the United States, if somebody said hello to them, they could go hello. And there's words they would use. They had no idea what they were saying, but they were able to communicate. The part of knowing what they were saying happened more and more as they were involved with other people speaking that language. But if you want to be safe and you're not sure, that's a default that I tell people that they can use. It's just
awesome. No, that's great. I think that the one thing that I'll add to that in terms of somebody that, well, we know I'm really, really good at calling in elk. I would say that I'm really good at calling in elk. Now, killing elk, no, I'm not that great at it, but in terms of calling in elk, so from that perspective, I could tell you that I think that folks listening to this, use your gut instinct. Like, what do you feel like that bull is saying to you? And if you follow what you feel like that bull is saying to you, I almost guarantee you're going to be right, because they, like you said, people that don't speak the language, they could hear the tone. So that was actually a really good way to put that, Joe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense how I said that?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think it's primal, whether you're talking to elk or talking to your dog.
Right.
Your dog, you're like, come on. And then he doesn't come. And finally, you're like, get over here. That dog knows it's something,
absolutely.
You're not happy. And you're going to hear that same kind of response out of a bull elk. You're going to hear the normal response, normal bugles. But when he gets ticked off, you're going to know it. It's like, ooh, wow. Oh, he's mad.
There is nothing better than hearing that pissed off bull growl, grumbly, just moany. I don't know if in all the things that I hunt, anything gets me more excited than when that bull is just pissed and he's ready to rumble. And so, anyways, guys, I know we're going super long here. We're coming on to about 2 hours. So let's maybe wrap this up by telling everybody where they could find you and where, we all have podcasts. Chris, I got to tell you, man, I've been waiting for your podcast to release a new episode for I don't know how long.
I know, man.
And it's been crickets.
Okay. Two things. And I will be honest with you. I have wrestled with the second one pretty significantly lately, and I am going to talk about that on an upcoming podcast. But just so two things. Number one, so I am, summer hit or whatever. When September hits, I guide, and the change in the Colorado season structure basically pulled me out of the pocket as far as being able to hunt for myself this year. So I just went all in on focusing on my clients. So I had to get down there first part of September. Then I was hunting the middle 2 weeks of September. And then I also run the hunting programs out here in Northwest Kansas for our deer hunts. And so I had to get all of our food plots and stuff situated and all the hunt infrastructure. And then literally this year we had guys roll in middle of October, and we just finished up with the bulk. I'm dealing with one landowner right now with his rifle hunt. I've got possibly another rifle hunter coming in, and then I start rolling into our doe management hunt. So my falls are really busy anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's gonna pull me out of the pocket a little bit, but that is legitimate, but it's kind of also an excuse.
Well, and there's the modeling gig too, right?
Well, it's going to say your new underwear line.
Correct. I do that for free. That's just a passion of mine. That's a side hustle. Let's just not talk about that for right now.
Well, I was going to say the whitey tidies, they have those shorts that say juicy, but the new thing that's coming on the market is it's going to say Roe Hunting Resources.
Okay.
And
okay. We're not releasing that
juicy
yet.
AF. Okay. So you know what? I'll edit that out, buddy.
It's okay. Thank you. Cause it's hard to put on a thong, but, so I'm going to send some.
Gotta go vertical, man. Gotta go vertical.
I'm going to send some to Dirk to test out before we release it.
He will, man. He's a good model for that.
What do you think he's wearing right now? Anyway, the other flip side is, and this is something that I think is going to be, and I finally have made the commitment to myself. 2020 has been I'm going to use a 4-letter word. It's just been a shit year for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's some things going on politically and from a social, philosophical level that have, as someone who I love, I'm a constitutional conservative that loves what the intent and the foundation of what this country was about. And yes, this country has failed or fallen short in a couple things, but I am not one of those ones that wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just decide to go down a socialist communist route. And so some events of these last couple of months have impacted me and have caused me to really think and do some serious deep level thinking on my own and just kind of figure out what does the future hold? And that, and the reason why I'm going to share this on the podcast is because I just recently figured out what it was that was affecting me and why it was just shutting me down, because in many ways, and I love, and I cannot thank you enough, Jim, seriously, for this podcast, because I needed this. I needed to just sit and get my mind out of it and just relax and have fun and joke with like-minded individuals about a passion that we all have. But
one thing that I got to clarify, man, is I was hoping Hillary was going to jump back in with those pantsuits. I was pretty excited about it, and I haven't seen shit from her lately.
Biden said he already is going to take over her wardrobe. So I think he's going to have the pantsuit covered for you.
You got to quit referring to him as he. It's they.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Fair enough.
Okay. We're getting way too deep.
But my point being is yeah. So there were some things that I had to wrestle through. I spent a lot of time educating myself and kind of doing some really deep thinking on what was important in my life and what I wanted to focus on. I think I'm back in a good mindset to just kind of have some conversations. However, I think people are going to see that there's going to be a different level conversation coming up on some of the new podcasts, because we're in a different time, and different times require different conversations. And you know what? It's part of who I am. I can't not have these conversations. I've tried it now for the past couple of years, and it's just driving me nuts. So it's time to get Chrissy back into the fray on what Chrissy has been passionate about. And so we're going to have a different level of conversation. So
no, yes, and I totally understand that, Chris. And it's just been a tough year. The whole, I always hate election years anyways, but I've what I've done is I've come to terms with the fact that the only political party that I care about is freedom and hunting. That's all I care about. Leave me alone. And I this isn't a political podcast, but people that listen to this have heard me rant on this before. This has been a very difficult year. It's been a very difficult economy in terms of, for my day job, to put it into perspective, I estimate big commercial projects, and everybody didn't want to do anything about their commercial roofs that were pouring down rain all spring because of this coronavirus. And now here we are in December. I'm running like a chicken with my head cut off because everybody wants a roof on. Because winter's coming.
Now it's not the time to put a roof on.
It's like it's just been a difficult year, and my escape for all of this stuff is always hunting, and the hunting community and the people that are in the hunting space. that I could talk to, and I can that those endorphins get flowing, man. When I talk about especially elk. I can't think of a better topic to refocus my mind and just talk about elk and how they talk and whether they like Debbie Does Dallas or Rocky Five and all these things that just they it always puts a smile on my face no matter what I do. And it's going to take a lot of the tension out of some of the things that maybe upset us, and so it's just a good place to be. And thank God I'm a hunter. That's I think what I'd leave that with. So.
Well, and podcasts like this where we can, obviously it's the four of us talking, but there's going to be thousands of other people, hopefully tens. I don't know how big your following is now, but I mean, I hope tens of thousands of people listening to it.
Millions. No, I don't. Not millions.
Dream big, man. Those are you got to bump those numbers up.
Look, I'm a full glass looking guy. It's not half glass around here. So go ahead.
The podcasts allow a lot of people to listen in and connect with people that maybe they don't have the chance to go sit at the archery range and shoot with, or go to the bar and hang out with, or go have a barbecue with, but they can damn well just sit there and listen and go, yeah, or maybe they won't. Maybe they sit there and go, this guy's full of freaking crap. Well, at least I got you to think. At least you can engage your brain and you could say, okay, well, wait a minute. I don't agree with that because of X, Y, and Z. Or at least maybe I made you think, and it gives an intellectual stimulation and a way to you flex your ideas and your thoughts and either commiserate with like-minded individuals or say, no, I don't agree with that, and think about why, rather than just living in your own little tight box. And so, no, it's been a personal growth year for me, with a variety of just shitty events. And so I'm in a headspace now where I think it's time to just climb up, saddle up, and let's just head out and let's just see where things go.
You need to, Chris, because I'm telling you right now, you have a lot to offer people, and so it is time. We gotta. Gosh, I
appreciate that.
You got a lot to offer people. I hope you don't get too bogged down with all this nonsense that's going on in the world. And I think I speak for everybody when I say there is a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of stuff that it's really frustrating this year. But man, you got a lot.
You can get yourself as frustrated as you want as well too. And just remember, guys, that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we deal with it. So.
Correct.
Very true. Good point.
Yeah.
So, okay. So Chris, we can look forward to some future podcasts coming from you. And what is your podcast called exactly?
It's everything I do, brother. I try to keep it easy. It's just Roe Hunting Resources.
Roe Hunting Resources.
ROE. Whether you're looking on Instagram, and here we go. There's one of them. I am going to start just on principle. I'm going to start moving away from Facebook and Instagram. I will still engage them, but I am going to start putting content up on Parler, up on MeWe, up on Rumble. I'm going to start moving away from YouTube a little bit more. But if you want to engage me in any way, you just look up Roe Hunting Resources, ROE Hunting Resources. You're going to find me. I keep that consistent across all platforms. Our website is just roehuntingresources.com. I mean, it's pretty darn easy.
Yep, and like I do every time, guys, as we're talking about this, you guys listening is I encourage you to jump onto roehuntingresources.com, check out the platform, and there's so much good content on there. Joe, how about you? Let's talk about your podcast and how people find you and go from there.
Go into Apple Podcasts, do a search for elk hunting, and you'll see Blue Collar Elk Hunting pop up there. So real easy to find it there, whether you're on Stitcher or any of your apps that you do. Just do a search for elk hunting, man, and you'll find us. And if you're not finding us there, just go to elkbros.com, ELKBROS.com, and everything's there on our site. All links to anything YouTube, any of our podcasts, to our Blue Collar Elk Academy, our base camp online training course, merch, anything you want there. We're real easy to find. You can connect to us there. We just recorded episode 99. We did actually 2 episodes. So we are 3 weeks away from our 100th episode of Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
I was going to say, you got a big milestone coming, man.
Huge, man. And it for us, it's huge. I mean, gosh, I remember when we started this, I was like 3 weeks into it, like, well, what content am I going to talk about after the 4th week? So, it's been awesome. It's really been great.
It's so funny you say that. When I started my podcast, I used to go through and I'd make these like episode guidelines or guides, and I would lay out the episode, all these questions I would ask, and like a format, right? And they sounded like I did that. In fact, Dirk was the first guy on my podcast, and I apologize about that, Dirk, but he was the first guy on the show, and I got away from that. And like what I found is we just have these great conversations. I don't need a guide. I don't need a questionnaire. I don't need any of that stuff. We're not, because I came from the writing background, right? And so I don't need any of that. I'm not writing anything. So this has been fantastic since I've shifted that. I had nothing really prepared except for my super cool intros of each one of you. I had nothing prepared for tonight, and so
they were awesome, dude. Those were A squad right there. Let me tell you.
No, and just like I said for Chris, guys, if you're checking any of this out, we're in the off season now. September's a couple months behind us, and that's kind of the focus of this discussion. But now is the time. Now is the time to jump on to Roe Hunting Resources and the Blue Collar Elk Academy, and obviously the Elk Collective, all these platforms where you have so much time to just absorb all this information, and you're going to be so much better come September 1, 2021, and it'll amaze you. And the confidence levels. And I don't know if it was Joe or who was talking about having confidence, and that's one of the mistakes hunters make is they don't trust their confidence level.
Dirk brought that up, but he's absolutely right, and that's huge.
Yeah,
on everything,
the confidence.
Man. It's all about confidence.
It's the confidence, and if you don't have the confidence now, get on these platforms. So I appreciate you guys, Dirk. Let's wrap it up with you. Where your platforms, your podcasts, the one that is always a tongue twister for me is the Bugler Broadcast Podcast.
Yeah, you have to say it right. You have to say the Bugler Broadcast Podcast. You have to take a breath in between because it's a tongue twister for me too. But you can follow me personally on the Bugler, one word, on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And then I have the Bugler Broadcast Podcast on Apple, iTunes, YouTube. I put those episodes on YouTube as well. It's on Stitcher and Spotify. So you can follow the podcast there. And then go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you also have a YouTube series coming out on your elk hunts, right?
There'll be some elk hunting videos coming out at some point. We're still editing and whatnot, but they'll make it out at some point. Someday.
Dirk, ever since
I don't have a release date yet.
I gotta tell you something, Dirk. Ever since you moved to southern Idaho with all the flatlanders, everything seems to take you longer to get out. Your podcasts, your videos, all this stuff. Like, what's going on? Is there too much Joe's Crab Shack going on down there?
I've been to Joe's Crab Shack a lot. I mean, I hate to admit it. Okay, every night this week I've been there. No, I'm just kidding. But
it's worth it. It's worth it.
It is worth it.
Every damn dime.
but Joe does crabs, man. Joe knows
barbecue
crabs.
Dungeness, baby. Barbecue Dungeness.
I may have hunted a little too much this fall. That's why I'm a little behind on on editing. So
Yeah, I hear you.
for sure. So, but and then as far as the Elk Collective, you can check that out at theelkcollective.com, and it's a digital education website, subscription based, and it's a video based education. So some people like to read stuff. Me, I seem to kind of start reading and I kind of get sidetracked, and pretty soon I'm thinking other things. But this is all video, so I feel like a lot of people learn a little easier by if they can watch it and listen and learn that way. And then if they were like, wait, what did he say? You can always go back and rewind and watch it again. So, and the cool thing about the Elk Collective is, like I said before, it's just not me. It's other guys in the industry, including Chris Rowe has got some information on there. But we also let them promote their own brand and their own stuff on there. We're not here to say it. The Elk Collective is the end all be all. It's a great place for everybody to gather and learn. And it's really cool. It's a really cool place. And also, it's not like a one and done. It's not like you pay for the course and that's all you get is this one trip through the salad bar and that's it. But no, so this year's content was unique. 2021, we're going to have all new content, and you're going to be able to see 2020's content, and it's just going to build from there. So yeah, it's going to be cool. So that way it gives people an incentive to, stay involved and keep watching, keep growing. So
awesome. I would like to just chime in real quick on, we've talked about the Elk Collective. We've talked about Blue Collar Elk Calling Academy, or I'm sorry, I keep saying calling Blue Collar Elk Hunting Academy. Yeah.
Yep.
And then Roe Hunting Resources. We've talked about all the three of these platforms. Picture this. If let's say you're listening to this and you're coming out and you spent 5 years, either more or less, give or take, and you've been out there, you've been a grinder, you've pushed it hard, you've put in the miles, you have called in elk, you have been out for 7 days in one trip and never heard a peep out of another elk, or you've maybe even tagged an elk, but you've been going at it and you're frustrated and you feel like you need to be better. Guys, the tools are right in front of your face. The tools to become a better hunter are right in front of your face. And it is within the 3 platforms that we have on this particular episode. And these were strategically picked for this episode for your benefit. So you can listen. Obviously, you can, and I've got to promote my own podcast. You can listen to the School of September. All these guys were on the School of September series that we did last summer, and that was a great series. But if you truly want to take it to the next level, you need to get on and instead of buying a new pack because your pack is 2 years old and maybe it's outdated and your favorite pack brand has come out with some kind of improvement that is supposedly so much better than 2 years ago. Let me tell you something, guys. I've hauled out elk on an old Vietnam era military pack, and you need to focus on you, invest in you. Roe Hunting Resources. We've got the Blue Collar Elk Hunting Academy. We've got the Elk Collective. These tools, if you go through the content of these tools and these resources that are available to you, you are going to go into September 2021 10 times better, at a minimum, 10 times better as an elk hunter in terms of confidence, in terms of your knowledge of the elk, in terms of your strategy, in terms of your calling, in terms of your care for, your meat care. Everything that you need to know is on these platforms. And if you're one of those guys that's been out, or gals that's been out for several years in a row and have yet to notch your tag, this is how you do it. And I'm telling you that from a guy that spent years not notching any tags on elk, to this last September, I called in over 17 bulls. Now, granted, I didn't kill one because I'm not, what am I, Dirk Durham? What am I, Joe Giglia? I'm no Chris. I'm not Chris Rowe, but I called in over 17 bulls. And the year before that, same thing. And guess what? I started notching tags. And guess what? I started having these crazy adventures. And I don't mean to just drag this on, but I cannot stress enough the most important investment that you can make for your upcoming season, this next coming season in September of 2021, is right between your ears, in yourself. Learn everything you can about these animals, and you will be successful. I don't say I guarantee it, but I promise you, your season will be enhanced by knowing this knowledge. Invest in it. Guys, thanks a bunch for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. I feel like we could keep this going for like 2 or 3 more hours, but this has been a great conversation. I've got some of the greatest elk minds in the world right here on this episode, and I just sure appreciate you guys joining me for this episode.
Gentlemen, it's been a heck of a lot of fun. I appreciate the invite, Jim, and congratulations on. I mean, seriously, none of us can shoot the arrow or pull the trigger for anybody out there. We can't control the wind, but all we can do is try to help you be more consistent in putting elk in front of you. And so to you, Jim, seriously, whether or not you've notched a tag, the fact that you're calling in 17 bulls, hell, that makes me jealous. So congratulations, man. Good job.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim, for the invite. Had a great time.
All right, guys. Thanks a bunch, and hopefully we could do this again in the future. And I can't thank you enough. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, Jim.
You made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We sure appreciate your support. This is Jim Huntsman signing off and reminding you to check us out at Instagram at The Western Huntsman and on Facebook at The Western Huntsman. And you can also check out the website at thewesternhuntsman.com. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.